HOA Karen Defaced Grandpa's bench, fined and banned from community. The park was quiet, except for the sharp hiss of spray paint slicing through the air. Karen, in her pristine white blouse and HOA badge pinned proudly to her chest, stood over Grandpa's bench. Her lips curled into a smirk as she defaced the memorial plaque. By morning, the neighborhood would know she meant business. The bench wasn't just any bench. It was a tribute to Grandpa Eli, a beloved veteran who'd spent his final years tending the community garden, teaching kids to plant sunflowers, and sharing stories of his service. When he passed, the neighborhood pooled money to build this bench, its plaque engraved with his name and a simple phrase for Eli, who gave us roots and wings. Mia, Eli's granddaughter, had poured her heart into the project, ensuring every detail honored his memory. For 2 years, the bench stood as a quiet symbol of love and unity until Karen decided it was an eyesore. Karen, the HOA's self-appointed enforcer, had been waging war on anything she deemed non-compliant. Her clipboard was her scepter, her rulebook, her gospel. The bench, she claimed, violated Regulation 7.2, no unauthorized structures. Never mind that the community had voted unanimously to keep it. Karen didn't care for votes or sentimentality. She cared for order, and order, to her, meant control. Mia discovered the vandalism at dawn. She'd come to the park to lay a sunflower on the bench, a ritual she kept since Grandpa's passing. The sight stopped her cold red paint streaked across the plaque. The words, "No loitering," scrawled in jagged letters. Her hands trembled as she traced the defaced engraving, her grandfather's name barely legible beneath the mess. Tears stung her eyes, but rage burned hotter. She knew exactly who did this. Word spread fast. By noon, a crowd gathered at the park neighbors, young and old, who'd known Eli's kindness. There was Mr. Patel, who'd learned gardening from Eli, Sarah, the single mom whose son Eli had tutored, and even old Mrs. Carter, who rarely left her porch but hobbled over with her cane, muttering about that awful woman. Mia stood among them, her voice shaking as she recounted the bench's story. This wasn't just a bench, she said, her eyes scanning the crowd. It was his legacy, and someone thought they could erase it. The whispers grew louder when Karen arrived, clipboard in hand, her heels clicking on the path. She didn't flinch under the crowd's glares. "The bench is unauthorized," she declared, her voice sharp as a blade. "I took action to protect our community's standards." "You're welcome." Mia stepped forward, her fists clenched. "You call this protection? You defaced my grandfather's memorial." "It's just a bench," Karen snapped, waving a dismissive hand. "You people act like it's a shrine. If you'd followed the rules, this wouldn't have happened." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Mr. Patel shook his head, muttering about disrespect. Sarah's son, barely 10, clutched his mother's hand, his eyes wide with confusion. Mrs. Carter banged her cane on the ground, demanding Karen apologize, but Karen doubled down, her voice rising. "I'm the only one keeping this place from turning into a slum. You all let this eyesore sit here, cluttering our park." That's when the twist came. A new voice cut through the noise, calm, steady, and unfamiliar. "Karen, you might want to check your facts." Heads turned. It was Tom, a quiet retiree who'd moved in a month ago. Nobody knew much about him, except that he kept to himself and always carried a small notebook. He stepped forward, flipping it open. "I've got the HOA records from the last 5 years. The bench was approved in a special meeting, signed by the board, including you, Karen, as secretary at the time." The crowd gasped. Karen's face froze, her clipboard slipping slightly in her grip. That's impossible," she stammered. But Tom held up a photocopy of the minutes, the signatures clear as day. Mia's eyes widened, a flicker of hope breaking through her anger. The neighbors pressed closer, their murmurs turning to demands for answers. Karen's composure cracked. "It doesn't matter," she shouted. "The bench is still an eyesore, and I have the authority to remove it." She thrust her clipboard forward, pointing to a highlighted rule, but the crowd wasn't listening. The air was thick with tension, the park a powder keg ready to explode. The confrontation came to a head that evening, when the HOA held an emergency meeting in the community center. The room was packed, standing room only, with neighbors spilling into the hallway. Mia stood at the front, the defaced plaque in her hands, its red paint a glaring accusation. She didn't shout or cry. She spoke with a quiet strength that silenced the room. "This plaque was my grandfather's legacy," she said. "He gave us a place to belong. Karen took that away. Not just from me, but from all of us." Karen, seated at the board table, scoffed. "You're being dramatic," she said. "This is about rules, not feelings." But her voice lacked its usual bite. The crowd's glares, Tom's damning evidence, and Mia's unwavering resolve were closing in. Then Sarah stood up, her voice trembling but firm. "Eli helped my son when I couldn't. That bench was where he read to him, taught him math. You don't get to call that an eyesore." Karen, one by one, others spoke. "Mr. Patel shared how Eli taught him to grow tomatoes. Mrs. Carter recounted Eli's visits with homemade soup when she was sick. Even Tom, the newcomer, added, I never met Eli, but I know a community that loves like this is rare. You don't destroy that. Karen, you protect it." Karen's face reddened, her hands gripping her clipboard like a lifeline. "You're all sentimental fools," she snapped, but her words fell flat. The board president, a weary man named Greg, finally spoke. "Karen, you've overstepped. The bench was approved. Your actions were vandalism. Plain and simple." The room held its breath as Greg called for a vote. All in favor of removing Karen from the HOA board, hands shot up. A sea of agreement. Karen's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, she had no retort. The vote was unanimous, but the consequences didn't end there. The next morning, the sheriff arrived at Karen's pristine colonial-style home. Mia had pressed charges for vandalism, backed by photos of the defaced bench in Tom's HOA records. The fine was steep, $2,500, enough to sting even Karen's ego. Worse, the community petitioned to ban her from all HOA activities, a move Greg endorsed. Karen, once the neighborhood's tyrant, was now its outcast. The bench was restored over the next week. Mia led the effort, sanding down the paint and polishing the plaque until it gleamed. Neighbors pitched in, bringing flowers, tools, and stories of Eli. By the time the bench was rededicated, the park was alive with laughter and memories, a stark contrast to the tension of days before. Mia placed a sunflower on the bench, her fingers lingering on the engraving. "For you, Grandpa," she whispered. Karen, meanwhile, was nowhere to be seen. Her house stayed dark, her clipboard abandoned. Whispers spread that she was planning to move, unable to face the neighbors she'd alienated. Some felt a twinge of pity, but most felt justice had been served. She'd tried to erase a legacy and ended up erasing her own place in the community. As the sun set on the rededication, Mia addressed the crowd. "This bench isn't just wood and metal," she said. "It's us, our stories, our love, our fight to keep what matters. I want to hear your thoughts. Was this fair? Did we do right by Grandpa Eli? Share your voice.